right. So, our own Sean Fitzgerald with 1851, thank you for being one of the judges of many for this and for taking the time to dial into the office here.
Oh, I'm excited to be on.
Awesome. So, with the FD Site Awards, obviously we've been doing this now for a couple of years on 1851. So I know you're familiar with some of the sites and trends that have been shifting. But overall, as you were taking a look at the sites that were submitted and nominated this year to be a part of this, was there anything that stood out as a trend overall, or just kind of overall sense of feedback of what you were seeing?
Yeah, I would say the first thing I noticed is that from the last um, review that we did a year or so ago,
Hmm.
a lot of improvements have been made from the websites. There were some really awful websites a few years ago, and now sites are getting much better aesthetically.
Yeah.
One of the things that I've seen after going through a lot of these is that there are a lot of templated sites that look exactly the same. Um, and That was the one thing I kind of noticed is like you want to incorporate best practices into your website, but you don't want to have your site look like everybody else's. It's more than just putting a logo and colors. It's got to have your brand feel, and it's just got to have that element that doesn't look like everybody else is out there. So if you're looking at having your website redone and you're working with a company, and ask them to see some of their examples that they've done of websites,
Hmm.
and if they all look exactly the same, then they're just basically putting a template together and putting your information on there. And candidates will visit other websites, especially your competitors. But if candidates are looking at 20 or 30 brands and they just see the same website over and over again, but just different content, it's just going to, I think, have a negative impact on your brands. And I think the sites that we saw in these reviews that just felt like it was the brand's site and design and feel and look, just aesthetically, just was so much better experience. I think from a visitor standpoint.
Yeah, for sure. And I know that we've talked about this a lot when that digital footprint, it's not just your consumer site or your FD site or your social media, it's everything. So having that consistency across the board without it getting repetitive is definitely something that I think is going to keep being important because candidates are doing their own research before they want to talk to anyone now. So they need to be confident that the brand is putting in the time and effort to make things the way that they should be. Otherwise, why are they going to invest?
Yeah, absolutely.
What, as you were looking at these sites, and obviously the replication of the same sites is something that pops up across the board, what were some of the things in your opinion that differentiated the good or okay websites from the really great ones?
I think it really comes down to what we've always said is the storytelling.
Hmm.
The sites that really talked about the whys, like why this is a great brand, why this is a great franchise opportunity, um, versus the brands that had sites that were just the what, like what they did, and like here's our products, here's our services, this is what we do, we're great.
Hmm.
Um, and I think the brands that were able to talk about their differentiators as far as a business opportunity, franchise opportunity, and really getting to down to the core of what they're all about. The other trend or recommendation that I would really kind of want to highlight is the fact that people nowadays want catered content. And so I'm a very visual person, so I like bullets and graphs and video.
Hmm.
Some people like content. And so having your site speak to all those different is going to be important. So just having one format's not enough.
Hmm.
Having downloads, videos, and I saw a lot more of that incorporated. But also, I think the next evolution and what we like to see is that catered content for different types of prospects because we know that there's going to be the top of funnel prospect who just comes to the site for the very first time, learning about the brand, just wants to get basic information. Um, and then you're going to have someone who is probably later stages that been familiar with the brand, maybe been to the site before and looking for deeper content. So having those different pathways, I think, is going to be critically important. And that's one of the things that I looked at when I went to the site is I looked at it from first impression, like first awareness, to okay, now I'm a serious candidate. I'm coming back. What type of information do I want to get and access? And if it's just one pathway for each type of person, then I think brands are missing opportunity to engage people, because if I'm just looking for basic information, I don't want to fill out a long form. In fact, many cases, I don't even give you my phone number because I don't want to get called
Right.
60 times. So those are some of the things that I can kind of see, recommend, and gathered from the review of those sites.
Absolutely. And I think that ultimately having those different pathways for people that are in different points of the process, it's ultimately advantageous to the franchisor too, because you're not having people drop out of the sales process that are getting annoyed that they're being spammed by all of these messages, and then B, it's saving their sales team time. Why should they be spending hours calling people, trying to get people on the phone that don't want to be on the phone yet? It's kind of a win-win from that standpoint, I think, too.
Yeah, and I think it's just kind of really measuring it. In franchising for so long, we've always classified a lead as just everybody's the same. Like, I just need leads, is what we always hear.
Hmm.
Then, one brand that I looked at and actually talked to the development person is like, hey, our website is converting great as far as getting leads, but we're not converting them to conversations calls. So I looked at their website, and essentially their website was like a splash page that just said, fill this out to get more information. So to even get basic information, you had to fill out their form. Well, that's not necessarily a lead.
Right.
And so they were getting a false positive in the fact that, hey, our website's really converting, when people were just gathering information. So, on the contrary, is that if people are coming to your site and you have long forms, they're going to bounce, and you may never get an opportunity to get information in front of them. So that's where we're really recommending is, like, when you're developing your site and looking at your site, is who that target audience is, what stage could they possibly be in, and having content or pathway that meets their needs. And that means it's going to be more dynamic type of sites than we've seen historically.
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of anything that you were seeing, obviously these longer forms or things that you're mentioning is might be something that's a little bit out of date. Was there anything else that stood out to you as a trend that maybe brands might consider shifting away from, or things that aren't necessarily going to lead to a qualified lead or a lead that's converting into a conversation?
Yeah, I don't see the need for very deep, deep, deep sites. I look at analytics on hundreds of brands, and I just do not see that people are. If you have hundreds of pages deep worth of content, you're just not getting traffic. That content's getting buried.
Hmm.
So that was one trend. I think 4 or 5 years ago, everybody was going to, like, I understand that SEO experts are going to say the more content you have, the better. But I would shift it to more relevant content versus quantity of content, and having content that's on there that's going to be meaningful to the candidate. So, answering questions that they may have would be way better way to utilize pages on the site versus just having a ton of content that just is just it doesn't have any type of I don't want to say purpose, but it's just there.
Right.
The other thing too is blogs. Everybody has blogs on their pages. No one reads them. So, I would utilize the blogs for something that's, again, going to be relevant to a candidate if they stumble across it. So that's going to be openings, newsworthy information. Um, this is going to be areas where people are just going to glance. So they're going to be looking at like headlines. And if it's interesting, like, hey, openings or new growth or whatever that whatever that is, use your blog for that. Posting content on just things that are maybe not, I want to say newsworthy. We're just not seeing people reading it. And so then it becomes, what's the strategy behind your blog? And are you just kind of wasting resources just putting up content for the sake of content? And, going from there.
Right. And consumers today and candidates who are going to be thinking about buying a business specifically, they're smarter than, even maybe if they're not smarter, but they have more resources at their disposal now. So people are going to be able to cut through and see when it's just content for content's sake on your website, or if it's reading more like an advertisement of, look, we're the best brand in XYZ industry. If there's something negative about your brand, or there's something that they want to find out about their brand, they're going to find it regardless. So being able, like you said, to answer some of these questions right off the bat and be more transparent and upfront about the process, it's just going to benefit the brand in the long run. And because otherwise you're going to be signing franchisees that might not be the right fit. And then that's what creates bad validation, and the cycle continues that way.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about this all the time too, is that, franchise development is not consumer process.
Hmm.
It's not an impulse buy. And so applying, say, traditional website best practices doesn't always necessarily apply to franchise development. What I mean by that is, consumer, you never want anybody to leave your site. So they come to your site, and if you're trying to sell a widget, you have them go to a page, they click on the page, they order that widget or that product, and they never leave. Um, in franchise development, it's the fact the odds of someone going to your development site for the first time and never leaving is very minimal.
Right.
They're going to leave your site. They're going to Google you, and they're going to look for third-party content and validation and information. So they know that your website's going to be promotional, and they're going to look for validation. And that's where news, press, stories, content can be very vital. So when you're building your website, keep that in mind. That you'll hear people say, like, I don't ever want someone to leave my site. Well, they're going to, and they're going to run comparables. They're going to look at brands that are similar. So your digital footprint becomes extremely critical outside of your website. Your website should not be your only digital footprint. Your digital footprint should be much more expansive, ranging from other sites, social media, and things like that.
Totally. It's one tool that's of many that go into this process for sure, in today's discovery world, at least. And as
Absolutely.
these things kind of continue to evolve with the technology that's available and the resources that candidates and salespeople have at their disposal, what do you think is going to be that kind of next iteration of franchise development websites? What's that next thing that brands might start considering to add to their site?
I think you're going to start to see more of a candidate journey aspect to franchise development sites. For many years, it's just been a information splash page, basically,
Hmm.
where you go and get basic information, and then the brands are like, "Inquire today. Let's fill out this form." I think you're going to start seeing sites that are going to be much more dynamic in the fact that it's going to be part of the sales process, the candidate journey, and I think again. When people realize that candidates don't want to talk to somebody till the very end,
Hmm.
the more you can provide them a journey or a process through digital is going to be more rewarding, and you're going to get people to that stage where you're talking to them. I mean, today it's just really hard to reach people, um, especially the people that are top of funnel, and you want to keep them engaged. And I think companies and brands that are looking at ways to reach that audience, provide content, is going to be really critical. And another thing too is with mobile and video being much more predominant and continue to be, especially when 5G comes out,
Hmm.
when it's even faster. Video is going to play in a much more important role, I think, in these sites as well. I mean, we're seeing more and more of it, a lot of testimonials, but you're going to see a lot more video used to help tell brand stories on these development sites.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Sean, for being one of our judges and for dialing in. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you.
All right.
It
Bye.
was fun.